So, you want to get into card games. Why in the hell would you want to do that? Maybe suicide is just not painful enough, or you just love spending money recklessly. Well, that's okay, because I'm also full of poor life choices. So when making the decision as to which one you'd be interested in playing, you're given a few options. You have your typical 40 fan roundup of one-off card games that will most likely die not 2 years after you invested in its debut. Whether they don't garner the interest or completely flop as competent or fun card games, the production of packs and sanctioned tournaments just stop. Then you have the big three, the mainstream card games to choose from. Your first choice and first ever card game period is Magic the Gathering. That's still going on just as strong as its debut. Well, most likely. Then your second option is the Pokemon trading card game. Created by the same company as Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast, but now owned by Nintendo. Whether you enjoy the card or video game version of Pokemon battles, if any, is a matter of your personal perspective. So then you have your last choice, the literal card game that could. Yu-Gi-Oh! I figured since I've legit made it the hook of my channel, not all of my content, well, all the content so far, I plan to diversify soon. That's a guarantee, not a promise. But considering the reason you visit my channel is Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've already made 6 videos on the subject with little to no context, unless you're already familiar with Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. Of course, except my lessons in consistency video I made a little while back. I think it's time I made a video on the subject of what exactly is Yu-Gi-Oh! Yes, it's an anime about a card game that inevitably became its own real-life card game. But what about its history, the creator who made it, and how exactly Yu-Gi-Oh! Became this serialized manga that spawned its own phenomenon? A phenomenon that still has both a huge cult following and one of the longest running competitive card game tournaments out of every TCG to come out of the TCG craze back when Magic the Gathering hit the world in 1993. Ladies and gentlemen, let's answer that question. What is Yu-Gi-Oh? The story of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a story of a young Kazuki Takahashi who loved gaming and drawing as a kid. Starting in high school, he started drawing his own manga, basically a Japanese comic book. And no, by the way, I'm not doing a what is manga video. His first artistic achievement was winning a Shonen Jump contest at 19 with a manga called Go Kyu Choji Ikemen, or in English, Battle Ball. A what looks to be like a baseball meets Superman type story that even got its own anime adaptation. After this, he would go on to get a job at a gaming company, don't know which one, but would still try to sell his manga ideas, soliciting several different publishers over a decade, but most of his stories would get rejected. He found his first small success prior to Battle Ball with 2 projects, Tenin Sokudanji Bure and Tokyo no Tsuzuma. I really hope I'm pronouncing all these right. Now, Tenin Sokudanji Bure had 2 chapters published, but despite this, I could not find no real info on either of these. Ironically enough, assuming Battle Ball came way first, but I'm willing to assume Tenin Sokudajin Bure was a typical shonen battle manga of the likes of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. As for Tokyo no Tsuzuma, assuming I couldn't find any actual info, and I do not know Japanese, so I could be seriously wrong with this accusation, but I'm going to assume it's probably some sort of hentai. His next idea that was approved, considering his passion was of both drawing and games, Kazuki Takahashi decided to meld his 2 passions together and create a story that would eventually define his career. Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Translated to Game King starts off by explaining the historical origin of games. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is about a timid and kind high school boy named Yugimoto who loves games. Yuki keeps to himself and lacks self-confidence, and also holds a mysterious puzzle box, given to him by his grandfather, who owns a game shop. His friend since grade school named Anzu, or Taya, is the only person he really talks to, until both Jinochi, or Joey, and Honda, or Tristan, who at first come off as bullies, eventually become his best friends. Lastly, the soul from within the Millennium Puzzle. The puzzle that Yugi solves spawns a second, more confident Yugi that only appears typically when Yugi is in danger. Also in the anime, exclusively, high school ditz Mio, who is just a dumb blonde. Yeah, wonder why she was cut.
not.
Yugi's puzzle box contains what else? A puzzle, found in an ancient Egyptian tomb, with a whole legend behind it. Also an encryption stating whoever solves the puzzle will inherit what is known as the Yamino game, what you can see but can't. The Yamino game, translated as the darkness game, is this sort of ancient Egyptian curse that select people can issue. The Yamino game forces the user and their opponents to play a game, with the loser of said game receiving a punishment. The Yamino game in the game played often tests the heart and soul of the contestants. So if you're a shallow piece of shit who loves money more than life, or is generally a giant ass, you're more susceptible to losing and getting a punishment game. Each episode would involve Yugi and friends going through typical high school life, often presented with problems, typically with problem people, being forced to settle their disputes with a Yamino game, which would typically involve or showcase a different game in each chapter. In the manga, the games that were made up by the writer had rules often posted in the chapters or at the end of one, so you, the reader, could play those games at home with friends, which at that time I have to assume was a pretty humbling idea. Not all the games were made up though. Examples of games played was Gachapon, a monster chess game, Digital Pets, Yo-Yos, a Dungeons and Dragons style RPG game, and stack the money on top of your hand and take a knife, stab as much money as possible without stabbing yourself first type of game. Yeah, at times it got pretty dark, because the Yamino game judges both your willpower and your resolve. A few stories specifically involved a card game being played that was a parody of Magic the Gathering, called Magic and Wizards. Of course, you know what resulted from this. This was the first spin on what would inevitably become the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. These chapters specifically influenced fans of the manga to mail both Shueisha, Shonen Jump, and Takahashi at the time to inquire about where they could acquire these cards. Probably assuming they were real, considering that the art was kind of original and not inspired by other Magic the Gathering monsters' art style and rulings. So not wanting to let this money, interest, slide them by, they commissioned some to be made by Bandai. Yeah, this card game we originally got was not the Konami produced ones that you see everywhere today. But it was a start. A one-shot season of the manga was also adapted into an anime. This was produced by Toei. At this point, Takahashi started to consider what he had unintentionally started. He had a passion for games just as much as he had a passion for drawing. He knew games were special, that games could get people together and interact with one another in a positive manner. So Takahashi decided to study games and their history. One part of this study involved him taking a trip to Egypt, where the oldest historically recorded origin of games took place. At this point, Takahashi made the decision to change the concept of Yu-Gi-Oh! To focus more on the card game it created. Toei even got one last project out of it with a Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie just called Yu-Gi-Oh! The Movie. Inspiring, I know. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist and Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters anime was made to reflect this new concept. The second series anime was produced by TV Tokyo. Both with the anime and manga already proving successful, it was time for Takahashi to attempt to make this card game a reality. Hell, one was already kinda made, and considering corporate entities love the idea of a successful product influencing you to buy more of the product to go with the product already being sold, this was the best opportunity to do so. Kazuki Takahashi went to sell the idea of the card game to Konami, who at the time expressed interest to make and distribute the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. I'm sure with a business plan involving distribution ideas, target demographic, and using an image of the blue eyes white fucking dragon of all things, suffice it to say it worked. Konami bought and acquired the rights to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, and it was born. Prototype Konami Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards were made along with what else? A Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game. Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsule Breed and Battle for PlayStation. Basically a simulated version of the Gachapon monster chess game I mentioned a little earlier. Takahashi had a couple stipulations with the way prizes would be managed, considering people, especially in a competitive environment, can be really shitty. That and frankly the cult mentality that can infest a local card shop can also be really discouraging to new players. Also, ruling rulings had to be debated since the card game wasn't fully fleshed out yet, or just didn't translate from the way it worked in the manga to real life. There were debates over its production and what the rules would be. There were even several conceived rulings that never made it past the cutting room floor, but still ironically were included in several other Konami developed video games. Some of these included a type chart system and a Guardian Star mechanic. Not long after this, the first series of packs and products were set for distribution. So in its native country of Japan, Yu-Gi-Oh is a hit. Japan sees a new card game on a yearly basis. Despite this, Yu-Gi-Oh is the TCG to play, outnumbering both Pokemon and even Magic the Gathering players. They definitely exist, but the numbers don't match the numbers of Yu-Gi-Oh has by comparison. Whereas here, in the States, Magic the Gathering remains and will probably always remain king. Yu-Gi-Oh still has a big presence here and in the rest of the world. But how did this come to be? Well, it's mainly a story about typical corporate practices and the big monster pet battler hype that grew to its peak with Pokemon. Now, I understand this is a What is Yu-Gi-Oh video, but the context of what and how big Pokemon and other monster breeders / battlers were at the time really puts the reason why Yu-Gi-Oh was picked up and the success it had into perspective. Monster breeder and battlers became this sort of phenomenon generally worldwide, such as the Tamagotchi and Digimon keychain pets, and of course Pokemon and all of its knockoffs. Pokemon was its own huge pop culture phenomenon in and of itself. And trust me, I would know. I was a Pokemon fanatic as a 5-year-old brat. Anything Pokemon related was my literal life back then. With something of that caliber, you bet your ass it made a lot of money. Though to be fair, a lot of monster pet games are popular, but not to the extent of Pokemon. Pokemon is a multimedia franchise, but Warner Brothers was the company behind bringing Pokemon to the height of its pop culture, with its dub of the anime that was done by 4Kids. A common network practice starting from the late 80s and early 90s was getting the rights to dub anime from the East. Part of the reason for this was that it was a relatively cost-effective way to specifically advertise to kids because networks would not have to spend the money to fund any animation. It was already done for them. The best business plans take the least amount of spending and garner way more value than spent. At this time, Warner Brothers' programming block, Kids WB, was looking for shows specifically with younger main protagonists. Now, the rest of what I have to say is mere exaggerated speculation, but this is how I imagine the exchange in the corporate meeting when Warner Brothers decided to buy the rights for Yu-Gi-Oh! Went. So, Pokemon has been one of, if not the biggest financial success in all of child media. But surely the appeal has no long-lasting success. It's just a fad in the moment that will surely fade not 2 years from now. So how do we keep this money train going? Well, the guys who made the hit show Batman the Animated Series did express interest in creating a Justice League spin-off type show. Yes, but then we have to fund the animation, which is expensive. Also, we could always show that idea to the Ted Turner block if needed. Pokemon was made on a strict budget of $25,000 and a ham sandwich. Wasn't it more like $15,000 in a box of sushi? Well, that's irrelevant. Look, you're not seeing the big picture here. We need something that's not only cost-effective, but can sell products like hotcakes in the same manner as Pokemon. Specifically something that you have to buy in order to play along with the characters in the story. That's what we need. Sir, according to my research, there is this Korean cartoon that's been getting big in its country of origin. That's about a card game and also has a real-life product the cartoon chills. Get it? Get it right the fuck now. Get in contact with the copyright holders immediately. We found our next money train, boys. Woo woo! Afterwards, I have to assume the guy who discovered Yu-Gi-Oh got a huge raise and the person who was too slow to suggest this first was fired. All to pay the raise they gave the other guy, not long after they decided to approve and animate the Justice League. So in the coming months, Yu-Gi-Oh would become the next big pop culture fad for kids. And not long after, I imagine, other countries would also pick up both the cards and the anime as well. Upper Deck would be the company to distribute the TCG, probably because it was easier for a sports card company, known in the Western world as such, to both sell the cards and have connections to show the products to. And the rest, ladies and gentlemen, is history. Yu-Gi-Oh! For the last 20 plus years or so has been living on the card game, anime, and the fan base that supports it. The original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series created by Kazuki Takahashi did end, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Has continued to thrive and live on in its own spin-offs and competitive card game scene that goes to this day. I've been a fan since it came out to the States, and I really have no plans to change that ever. I tried that once. Didn't work out too well. I'll be in it until the day it no longer makes any money, and everyone drops it and moves on to the next thing. Then I will still even have my card collection. I legit have a tiny deck box of specific cards that don't ever leave my side when I go to play. One of which is a Blackluster Soldier from Invasion of Chaos. It's not even first edge like the Stingies would say, and I don't really care. At the time I bought it for way too much money. More money than it's even worth today, really. But to me it's really special, because it was the first time I ever spent that kind of money on a single Yu-Gi-Oh card, basically solidifying my competitive spirit. Yu-Gi-Oh to me is really special, and frankly addicting, but in a good way. I will be into Yu-Gi-Oh until the day it ends, my friends, and that's just the way it's gonna be. I really hope you enjoyed this video. For as much work as it was to both write the script, make the video, edit voices, everything that I do to make these videos of quality, I really did enjoy making this. Let me know if you enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! As much as I do, to the point where you'll make videos about them constantly. And let me know in the comments if you want what you think about everything, including Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever. I'd really like to know. Alright guys, this was Ozsiris with What is Yu-Gi-Oh! Happy New Year's, enjoy your holiday, whatever you celebrate, and I'll see you again next year for more Yu-Gi-Oh! And whatever the hell else I want to make for content. Peace.